Can you describe for us what exactly is the concept of the Silent ICU and how that can help improve outcomes and reduce nursing burnout?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I want you to think about and picture what a normal intensive care unit looks and feels and sounds like. That ICU is incredibly noisy. And this is particularly exacerbated in the elderly population. And the problem is that they get delirium. They get confused. So what we look at when we look at a silent intensive care unit is technology to silence all those medical alarms and those alerts that are at that patient's bedside, but to have that information then immediately available to the clinician. And then the benefits of that are absolutely much more improved patient outcomes because the patient is quiet and they can heal. The nurses are far less stressed. So it's a win-win all the way around.
Welcome to Beyond the Blueprint, a podcast designed to empower healthcare professionals, enabling them to improve care delivery through integrated design and technology innovation. My name is Greg Malkery, and joining me is my co-host Keith Washington. Whether you're redesigning a hospital, launching a new digital initiative, or just curious about the future of healthcare, then you're in the right place. Let's explore together what's possible when we go beyond the blueprint.
Well, our guest speaker today is Kathleen Snyder, a nationally renowned expert in alarm management and clinical decision support systems. Kathleen, welcome to our series. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me today. And again, I have a plethora of experience in the nursing area, both from the operational standpoint as well as the clinical standpoint within healthcare systems. And then I have migrated over some years ago into the vendor side of the world. And on the vendor side of the world, I have leadership roles in clinical monitoring, alarm management, communication, collaboration, as well as electronic medical records and various medical devices. And I've done that from a product management standpoint, as well as a product marketing and consulting standpoint. So I'm thrilled to be here today.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Keith, do you have any opening remarks for today?
Yeah, Greg, maybe just to highlight some of the goals of Beyond the Blueprint. So Beyond the Blueprint brings together thought leaders to explore how innovative design can really help manage complexity and enhance patient care. We think a good design, it not only aligns organizations with their core mission, but also it promotes flexibility, it promotes transparency, it promotes collaboration. So we think by addressing both the opportunities and challenges, we think this can help foster, conversations about how to integrate and co-create systems that really empower staff and patients alike. So I'm hoping that, today's discussion is just another example of how this platform can help organizations navigate complexity, navigate change, particularly from a nursing perspective. So I think this is a really important conversation topic today. I'm looking forward to it.
You're right. Thank you, Keith.
Now, before we dive into today's discussion, I want to recognize our valued sponsors who've made Beyond the Blueprint possible, Storage Systems and Simplify Medical. With their support, we're able to bring you insightful conversations around healthcare design and innovation. If you enjoyed today's show, I encourage you to subscribe so you never miss a future episode.
So why don't we jump right in? Kathleen, let's start with what, in your eyes or your perspective, what are the main challenges that hospitals face with alarm management, especially from the perspective of the CNIO? And how do these challenges relate to issues such as nursing burnout and labor shortages?
So it's no secret that there is a huge shortage of nurses in the workforce today. And it's also something that there is no end in sight in terms of solving that issue in the near short term regarding that nursing shortage. And as a matter of fact, when we look at research, it currently indicates that there's anywhere from 450,000 to up to 1.1 million in the U.S. in terms of nursing shortages, again, based on various research studies. the takeaway from there is the fact it's a huge issue and it's not going to go away anytime soon. And there are multiple factors that actually are causing that nursing shortage. Number one, educational issues, high turnover, the severity and complexity of nursing in the acute care setting, as well as an aging workforce, both in terms of supply of nurses, as well as the demand of increase an aging population in the United States. So all this is becoming challenging for that nursing shortage. How that impacts that workforce is dramatic. It means there are less nurses to do more work, and that causes issues and challenges. So healthcare organizations today are faced with what else can they do to help mitigate those issues around the nursing shortage. And in my case, it is around technology to help augment some of those particular aspects for nurses. And how CNIOs come into this role is really critically important. First of all, not every healthcare organization has a CNIO, and their roles are very challenging. They need to understand the nursing side, and they need to understand the clinical informatics side, and help marry those in terms of how that works for their particular organization. So it is very much a balancing effect for that CNIO, both in terms of implementing technologies as well as exploring technologies to truly help nurses in this workforce shortage, as well as to help mitigate that burnout that those nurses are experiencing.
Right. Kathleen, how are technologies like medical device integration and AI-driven smart alarms transforming the way hospitals are managing patient alarms?
So, medical device integration is incredibly important within the healthcare system. And for those of you that are not familiar on this forum with medical device integration, think about the fact that there are multiple different medical devices that all have different alarms and different alerts to indicate to a clinical staff that there is a problem with their technology. So that is a challenge that that workforce faces. And if you think about that challenge from that workforce, now combine those different alerts and alarms that are going off in the clinical setting with a workforce shortage. And that, again, is where we're seeing a dramatic issue and an opportunity, per se, in this particular area, is around those aspects. And I absolutely see involved in this now and in the future. Artificial intelligence, and within the medical industry, what it's like to be called is augmented intelligence, because we never want to take away clinical decision making from the workforce itself, but we want to be able to augment that through augmented intelligence, workflows, technologies, things of that nature to really help support that clinical staff.
How are hospitals approaching the idea of change management to ensure that these advanced learning management systems are tightly integrated with clinical workflows?
So it's interesting. To me, that is the foundation for technology adoption. For successful technology adoption is really truly identifying and understanding those change management issues, making sure that healthcare organizations have the training that they need, that they understand the workflow gaps, that they understand where those changes need to take place, and go through the different aspects. Also, often I see healthcare organizations that believe that whatever the technology that they are implementing is okay and that they don't need dramatic change management to go along with that. And in my experience, that is a mistake, and it's a financially costly mistake, because if you don't address the change management issues up front, then what you have is poor adoption of technologies down the road, which means a poor investment. And then the reality is that then the hospital really truly hasn't solved the problem that they set out to solve in the first place. And then that's oftentimes where it's frustrating for the hospital, it's frustrating for the vendor. There's sometimes this finger pointing that goes back and forth. And the reality is it often goes back to that change management of understanding what the issues are, of educating the staff, of not doing a one and done, but coming back in and re-educating and then doing the follow-up from that perspective. So to me, it's a critical importance each and every time technology is implemented.
Are there any specific best practices from a change management perspective where you have a higher likelihood of a successful deployment implementation?
Absolutely. I think one of the key areas is from the time that your staff first come on board. So that onboarding experience, get those people up, knowledgeable and operational on your current technologies, on the things that they use every single day. So that when they come out of that gate, so to speak, that they understand those solutions and they know how to use them and they know how to effectively use them. It's also an opportunity then, if you bring new people on board and you train them effectively, that if you have existing staff that have, over, of course, of time, maybe forgot elements, that you have your new individuals that have just been refreshed on the technology. So it's a win-win from that standpoint. Also, the ongoing training, I cannot emphasize that enough. When it comes to new systems that are being deployed, is to have that ongoing training, have the follow-up, have the communication with them. What's working, what's not working, how can it be improved from that process? And the interesting thing is that most vendors, medical device vendors, are very anxious to hear about that feedback so that they can also identify ways to improve their various technologies that they bring to market. So again, I would absolutely emphasize that going forward, as well as understanding how that technology aligns in their daily workflow. So that, again, that we can incorporate that now and going forward.
In a recent conversation we had offline, you mentioned this concept of the silent ICU as being instrumental for creating a natural healing environment. Can you describe for us what exactly is the concept of the silent ICU and how could help improve outcomes and reduce nursing burnout?
Absolutely. So first of all, I want you to think about and picture what a normal intensive care unit looks and feels and sounds like, right? It is incredibly busy, multiple patients, lots of activity, lots of devices, and invariably multiple devices are being alarmed and alerted at the same point in time. Clinicians will typically be near the bedside and can glance over technology again. Some of the challenge with that is alarm fatigue, meaning that the nurse hears about these audible alerts so often that sometimes they start to become a little, we'll say, tone deaf to some of those alerts and things. So it's the difference of, knowing when to, really act immediately versus being able to not act immediately. But when it comes to that ICU is incredibly noisy. The challenge is in that environment, in addition to the noise, is it's difficult for the patient because of all the noise and the alarms. It's difficult for patients to sleep. So there's a huge problem in intensive care units. And this is particularly exacerbated in the elderly population. And the problem is that they get delirium. They get confused. And it's difficult for them to understand what's going on. And then that obviously makes them more challenging or to try to get out of bed or do something that can harm themselves. So that's that environment in general. So what we look at when we look at a silent intensive care unit is technology to silence all those medical alarms and those alerts that are at that patient's bedside, but to have that information then immediately available to the clinician. So through software and middleware, being able to set directly to the clinician, say on their mobile phone. What that does then is create a very nice, quiet environment at the patient's bedside. So it's calming, the patient can sleep, there's not as many interruptions. When the family members come in, it's calming. They're not stressed out with, oh my gosh, what's happening to my family member? And then the benefits of that are absolutely much more improved patient outcomes because the patient is quiet and they can heal. The nurses are far less stressed. So it's a win-win all the way around.
Kathleen, can you share some real world examples where hospitals have successfully deployed these next generation alarm management systems?
So some of the examples when we talk about a silent ICU and implementing that successfully, um, one that actually comes to mind that I have seen there be extreme value and benefit in is actually in the neonatal intensive care unit. And again, I don't want to name particular hospital, but if you think about that neonatal intensive care unit and the high level anxiety with prematurely born infants, um, and the fact of all, again, multiple machines, infusion pumps, things of that nature that are going on. This is an environment that has particularly benefited by having alarms silenced and being able to be sent directly to the clinician. And again, it's the benefit not only for the patient, in this case, obviously, that it's a little newborn, to have less stress and anxiety, but it's also of great particular value in terms of that implementation to the clinical staff, as well as you can imagine to those new parents that are on high alert and stressed about certainly everything at this point in time. So for them to have that calm, healing environment is tremendously valuable. And it's a difference of night and day between walking through a neonatal intensive care unit where alarms are silenced versus a neonatal intensive care unit which has not implemented yet that type of technology.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Um, what are some of the operational challenges that these organizations face when they attempt to deploy these solutions at scale? Perhaps across different hospitals within their network.
Certainly. Some of the different operational challenges are number one is workflow. And that is truly understanding the clinician's workflow and where those gaps are and what needs to be solved and addressed along those process so that you have a very good picture of before and a very good picture of afterwards in terms of how are you going to measure success? How are we going to know that this absolutely worked from an implementation standpoint? And then in addition to the workflows, we've already spent a ton of time on it, but change management is incredibly important to that operation being effective. And the third area I would say that I have seen happen within healthcare organizations is when they look to implement and to try to cut corners, what certain organizations will do is say, well, you know what? We're not going to hire the vendor to do this part. We're going to go ahead and do it ourselves. And I understand the financial rationale for doing that, but I've also seen some operationally very negative outcomes that have happened because they could not implement it as effectively as what the vendor could do so. And then in the end, I've had seen situations where then they've absolutely had to hire the vendor to come back in and redo what they tried to do in the first place. So not only did they not save money, but it actually ended up costing them more. So those are just some of the key fundamental lessons that I have seen over the years.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Hey, Keith, I know you must be chomping the bit here. Please feel free to chime in here and interact with Kathy.
So I guess one more question is about the value of this alarm management and a system that's more integrated and designed for this seems like it's going to, let's say, avoid a lot of distraction for the nurses. So what, I guess in your experience, what are if you've heard maybe the top three distractions that nurses really are frustrated with this particular alarm management, what would that sound like?
Yeah, and you kind of hit that on the head there in terms of distractions. And really, again, one of the big ones is alarm fatigue. Just getting so many alarms all the time that then they become tone deaf, so to speak. And that's again, then when there can happen patient safety issues, because then there could be a real alarm that is ignored. Um, and it's interesting that research has indicated up to anywhere from 80 to 99% based on the research study of alarms are really not of critical, life-threatening importance. But again, there is that 1+% that absolutely is. So alarm fatigue is absolutely taught. The second thing that happens is, again, because of alarm fatigue, because of all these different devices alerting and things, is the fact that that really slows down the operational efficiency of the clinical team. I mean, I can give you just a typical example. If you can imagine a nurse going into a patient's room and taking care of all the different devices in the patient and walking out and getting 3/4 of the way down the hall, and then another alarm goes off and they need to end up walking back again, and so on and so forth. So it really negatively impacts the efficiency if you do not have an effective alarm management system and technology solution. And then certainly the impact on the well-being of the patient, which we already spoke about. Um, so again, it's, having an effective alarm management system, being able to respond to the right alarms at the right time is critically important, and to have that effective device integration with those medical devices so that nurses have what they need in the palm of their hand.
Kathleen, can you share your final thoughts on the future of alarm management and its role in healthcare?
Certainly. So I think that having an effective technology and alarm management solution is critical for healthcare organizations. Now, I recognize and understand that many organizations have taken non-technology steps to improve their alarm management through policy management, education, things of that nature. But to really get us as a healthcare system entity where we should be, it absolutely does involve a encompassing integration of medical devices that are at the bedside to alert nurses and clinicians, as well as the data management, the clinical information, the decision support systems, and pulling that into a comprehensive solution to really help nurses and other clinicians, physicians, et cetera, to be able to make effective clinical decisions. And although we did not spend time on this particular entity around this topic, again, it's one of the cogs in the wheel of this whole clinical communication and collaboration issue in order to help advance healthcare organizations. I see it as being very integral. Certainly, I see their growth in this area from everything from remote clinical to monitoring, video surveillance, a number of different areas that obviously in today's session we didn't have time to go into in detail. But I absolutely consider this as a core foundation element for healthcare organizations.
Looking ahead, what are the major innovations you anticipate in alarm management and clinical workflow optimization over the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, I definitely see number one from an industry standpoint as it relates to alarm management is that I believe we will start to see more consolidation or convergence of different entities and pillars. For example, now we have some technologies, vendors that are very, very effective in a clinical communication element, such as text messaging, secure chat, things of that nature. We have other industry segments that are very good in video conferencing and physician to physician or clinician to clinician video conferencing, others that are really knowledgeable in alarm management and how to get that alarm securely to the appropriate clinician. So I see in the future here, and particularly supported by AI, is that ability to have this comprehensive solution and experience for healthcare industries. And as we look at UCAS or unified communication, again, this all goes along that particular area. So I see that there will be absolutely a lot of growth and that the benefit will absolutely be the clinicians at the side and the patients.
Excellent, Kathleen. One more fun kind of question. What advice would you give your younger self about going into nursing leadership and or informatics?
I'd say do it soon. You're going to love it.
Kathleen, I'd like to thank you for sharing your time, insights, and perspectives, and to our sponsors, Storage Systems and Simplify Medical, who made this conversation possible. Well, for audience members who are not familiar with this, Spyglass Consulting is a product and go-to-market strategy firm focused on disruptive technologies and growth opportunities within the healthcare and life sciences industries. We proudly serve more than 250 leading entities who are a combination of technology companies, management consultancies, healthcare providers, and investment organizations. We've published more than 30 market research reports on a diverse set of topics. To access our library of paid research and to gain a deeper insight into how technology is reshaping the healthcare industry, I invite you to visit our website at www.spyglass-consulting.com. Well, thanks again, Kathleen, for your valuable insights. I've certainly learned a lot about alarm management and why it's essential in enhancing clinical workflows and supporting our nursing staff. I appreciate your time and expertise in helping us understand these critical issues. Keith, would you like to share any final thoughts on today's webinar?
Yeah, I'll repeat that, Greg, about thank you, Kathleen, for sharing your expertise and shedding a light on this role of alarm management. I think the conversation included some really valuable insights into how to make this a priority to help enhance staff satisfaction and ultimately improve patient outcomes. So I think your perspectives on the challenges and opportunities in standardizing alarm management across health systems are really full of practical approaches to manage change and the importance of alarm management really improving patient safety. So I'd also like to thank Greg. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us on this journey in this episode of Beyond the Blueprint. We just hope this today's discussion really inspired you to think more about alarm management technology and better coordination of this technology to drive your results for your organization. And also, would love to have you back, Kathleen, on a future episode to keep this conversation going. Hope you'll come back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And with that, I think we have a wrap for today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Blueprint. Together, we're exploring how thoughtful design can simplify complexity, enhance patient care, and create meaningful change. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review in order to help us continue the conversation. Let's reimagine healthcare together on Beyond the Blueprint.